Hey, my name is Luis, and I bought the cheapest LS1 Trans Am on Facebook Marketplace. In this video, I'm going to go over why I wanted this car, all the problems I encountered with it, and at the end, I'm going to show you how much I paid for it, and you decide whether I got a good deal or I got scammed. This is a 2000 model year Pontiac Trans Am base. It is not a WS6, although it has a WS6 hood and the WS6 wheels, but it did come with an LS1 engine as well as a T56 6-speed manual transmission. So this particular car has a very desirable engine and transmission package. Now, not all 4th generation F-bodies actually got the LS1 engine, as it was introduced in the 1998 model year. Now, even though LS1 engines by themselves are very reliable, this car, not so much. So the very first thing that was wrong with this car, and probably the reason why I got it so cheap, was the T56 transmission. Upon buying the car, I did notice that 5th gear was completely gone. Someone blew it up. Meanwhile, 1st and 2nd were still pretty good, and 3 and 4 there was a grind in between the gears. 6th gear there was grinding, and it was kind of difficult to drive the car, going from 4th gear all the way to 6th gear, especially on the freeway. But the good and the slightly bad news is that I had a working T56 that's in another project car that I have, a 72 Trans Am, and I ended up stealing that transmission for this car. When I pulled the old transmission out, I found that the input shaft was way too loose, and I found the input shaft seal was leaking bad, and I found that the input bearing or bushing was completely worn out. It was actually really difficult to get out because there was no more meat left on the actual bushing. But all was good as I took the clutch and I got a new pilot bearing and I installed it, and this transmission seems to be working good, although it does make some whirring noises, so I might have to look at it again sometime in the future. The second issue with this car that I actually found out when I was checking it out in person is that the fuel pump was bad. I kind of suspected something was going on with the fuel because the car couldn't really rev up. I think I got maybe to 4,000 RPM and the car was really giving out towards the end. So when I got home, I did a fuel pressure test and it failed. It couldn't go up to the 58 PSI. That is, I guess, the standard PSI for the fuel system. The regulator wasn't working because it would be leaking down as soon as I turned off the key, so it wouldn't hold any pressure in the system. So what I decided to do was, instead of pulling down the gas tank, which is kind of a pain in these cars, you have to drop the rear end a little bit, disconnect some of the suspension components, drop the muffler. I decided to do the controversial but very fast and easy way, which is cut the fuel door in the trunk. Now, I didn't cut this car up. I tried to do the best job that I could and actually put some hinges in the door that I cut, and I think it makes the fuel pump a lot more serviceable now. So whenever the fuel pump goes out again, I can go ahead and replace it, and it'll take me maybe an hour instead of half the day that it will take. So the next issue with this car, which is not really a problem, but it's a problem for me because I live in California, is that this car was not smog legal when I bought it. It had long tube headers. It basically had no mufflers, no catalytic converters. It had an LS6 intake with a non-working EGR anymore because those intakes don't have a working EGR provision. And it made it pretty much impossible to smog it and transfer the title. I had to go through the painstaking process of finding all the original stuff. So I had to find an LS1 intake, which is a worse performing intake, all the exhaust parts. And now I didn't want to use the stock manifolds for this car just because I don't think they look good. I found some smog legal shorty headers specific for this year, which is a problem because the 2000 model year is actually like a in-between year of the LS1 emission systems. The 1998 to 1999 LS1s had a different catalytic converter system and it had an EGR. I needed the catalytic converters from a newer 2001 to 2002. However, I also needed a working EGR system for this engine. So it was kind of a pain in the ass, but I ended up finding all the parts I needed and I was able to get the car smog legal as best as I could, and it passed. Now, when I was swapping over the LS6 intake for the LS1, I noticed some weird things in the engine bay. I found an extra fuel line that wrapped around the engine. It actually went to the front of the engine underneath the air box. That didn't really make sense to me, so I did some more digging and I actually found 2 nitrous solenoids hidden inside of the air box of this engine. Now that's another thing that the original owner didn't tell me about this car, was that it had a secret nitrous system installed, and it was still currently installed in this car. The reason I say secret is because they went out of their way to hide the fuel lines as well as the nitrous line, and I didn't spot it until months after owning this car. And then when I got to the back of the car is where I found where the original nitrous bottle was mounted. They actually removed the rear bumper brace and they installed a mount for a nitrous bottle. The nitrous bottle isn't there anymore, but the connector is still there. For the time being, I have everything disconnected and don't have the solenoids in the car anymore, just because the fuel lines were kind of old already and it really didn't seem safe to have active fuel being passed to the solenoids all around the engine, going around the exhaust. So I decided to disconnect it. But who knows, it might come back in the future. The next thing wrong with this car was the interior. This car was originally sold in Arizona based on some paperwork that I found inside. It's not surprising to see that the interior is completely torched. I mean, the dash is cracked, the seats are completely gone, the door panels, basically all the interior plastic needs to be replaced. Although I don't really care for the color that much, so it's going to be replaced to a nicer color anyway. My plans are to install some new seats and maybe find some additional parts to fix the dash and the door panels. Now the next issues that this car had are in the engine. Although the engine itself is pretty healthy, the accessory drive system is very worn out. I've already had to replace the alternator because it suddenly seized on me and started smoking out of the engine bay, and which kind of scared me when it started happening. And once I fixed that, then the real problem kind of shined through, which is that the rack and pinion was toast. If I would turn the wheel one way, it would drop half of the fluid every time I turned, and it got progressively worse until I finally decided that I needed to replace the rack and pinion, which is notoriously hard on these cars. From the factory, the bolts that hold the rack and pinion, one of them is easy to get out, the other one actually contacts the oil pan of the engine. And so if you want to take that bolt out in order to take off the rack and pinion, you actually need to lift the engine slightly out of the car, or you need to drop the subframe or the suspension from the bottom of the engine. Either way, you need to take off the motor mounts, and I didn't really want to do that. So there's one method that I saw on YouTube. You can cut the bolt out. And that's what I decided to do, although it's really sketchy because you can accidentally nick the aluminum oil pan and you'll have a way bigger job on your hands. So I wouldn't really recommend people do that unless they're comfortable with the idea that they might have to also replace the oil pan. Now the rack and pinion is working great and there's no leaks at all, although I still have a really big mess underneath the hood because of all the oil leaking over the years that this car has never had the rack and pinion replaced. The next set of issues on this car has to do with the body, and as you can kind of tell, the body is in rough shape. On this side over here, we have a nice little dent, and on the other side, we actually have pieces of paint that have fallen off. And as you can see, and as I mentioned earlier, this car being from Arizona, the clear coat is peeling in multiple areas. On top, looks burnt like someone had a torch put to it. And basically all over the car, there's some form of sun damage. And one last thing, I don't know why, but this car has bad luck with mirrors. When I bought this car, that mirror on the passenger side was broken and it was flopping around. So I replaced it with a black one that I found in the junkyard. And literally a few weeks after I replaced that one morning I come to find my car and some person just broke this other side. So I have to find another replacement for this side as well. And now that we're on the topic of body damage, I want to share the absolute worst thing about this car, in my opinion. And it's the fact that it has rust, and rust in a bad spot, and it's particularly bad looking rust. I don't know why I didn't think to check this particular area. It really bummed me out, and I was kind of thinking about it, that if I had saw this when I was buying the car, I probably would not have bought the car. And that is that there's rust in the T-top area right above the windshield. And man, and this rust is bad. And none of my skills are in bodywork, so I have no idea the steps I need to take in order to fix that. And I never thought to take off the T-tops, but it makes sense because, you know, water gets in here and it goes stagnant, and there's really no way for it to evaporate. So it makes sense that there will be rust here. So if you're buying one of these cars, make sure you check right above the T-top to see if there's any rust. The next thing with this car has to do with something I mentioned earlier in the video, and that is that this is just a base Trans Am and not a WS6 model Trans Am. So this hood is not original, and these wheels are not original either. I honestly didn't think that you could get an LS1 Trans Am but not have it be a WS6. I thought by default all LS1 Trans Ams were WS6s. When I bought it, it actually came with the regular Firebird hood, and I found an OEM WS6 hood to put on. Actually, finding an OEM WS6 hood is pretty hard. There's a lot of aftermarket ones available, but they're made out of like a weird flimsy fiberglass, and I've heard stories that they don't fit well and that you need to run hood pins or else the whole thing can just literally snap off on you on the freeway. And this hood that I found is actually the same paint code as the car, so it looks like it's a factory WS6, especially with all of the clear coat damage that the rest of the car has. And the wheels, I found them locally as well. These are the WS6 Speedline wheels. They're 17 by 9s, I want to say. The original wheels that I had on this were the base Firebird looking wheels that were like 16 by 8, and I think these Speedlines look really cool in the car because it makes it look like a 2001 or 2002 WS6, which is like the most popular version of these cars because it's like the last of the last. The next set of issues I discovered when I was driving the car, so I really noticed that the car kind of feels and steers and handles like a boat. It's just really like all over the place, and it's not what you would expect a sports car or a modern muscle car to feel like. Probably needs all new shocks around, all new springs, all new bushings, and I haven't got to that yet. I also think that the stock ride height is a little too high for my taste, and so I would like to drop it when I do put new suspension components in. The brakes are also really worn out, especially in the front. Whenever I brake, I get like the death wobble shakes, and it kind of makes it a little uneasy when you're going really fast. I don't exactly want to swap in replacement parts as I want to upgrade it. So in a future video, we're actually going to be upgrading the front brakes. So stay tuned for that. And that is every single thing I found wrong on my Trans Am. And now for the price, I bought it for $3,700. Do you think that was a good price, considering all the problems that I found with it? Let me know down in the comments. I want to hear your experiences with F-bodies. I want to hear experience buying cars that didn't turn out the way that you expected. I'll see you again in the future with all the upgrades we end up doing to this car. You're really going to want to watch it. Thank you guys for watching.